In this lesson, we'll conclude a review of PSAT Reading Test 2, Section 1. We're still on the fifth and final passage, Gut Bacteria Allows Insect Pests to Foil Farmers. And if you've watched these videos in sequence, in the previous lesson we discussed this serious pest of the U.S., this western corn rootworm, and how farmers were having a difficult time eradicating them. They had a preference, the rootworms, for laying their eggs in corns, and so the farmers, what they did is they alternated the crops, but then there's this rotation-resistant rootworm that would do it in this, lay the eggs in the soybeans. So the alternate year, the eggs would hatch, the larvae would hatch in a crop of corn, and the scientists were really just stumped, like for a long time, like what causes these rootworms to adapt, and they finally figured it out that it wasn't the rootworms themselves, but it was the bacteria in their gut. And we are in question number 44 now. And this is a word in context as used in line 24. What does separate mean? So let's just look at separate in line 24 and try and predict it. There are almost certainly genetic differences that separate the rotation-resistant rootworms from their normal peers, but what are they? And so here they're trying to determine the cause and genetic differences that separate. And you can almost predict this, that sort of differentiate them from their normal peers. We don't see differentiate, but we do see distinguish, right? To determine the differences, not discharge or extract or scatter. So this one, I think, was pretty straightforward. The answer is A. And let's take a look at 45. According to the passage, the gut bacteria of rotation-resistant rootworms, and we scan down, we see this is a two-part question. And remember, this was later on in the passage. The gut bacteria wasn't even really mentioned, I think, until much later. And we've already looked at these other parts, 29 and 39. It wasn't until much later. And let's see. The answer for this one, we know it's got to be here because they were stumped. This paragraph, we had a question about it. They had no idea. The results were inconclusive. So the gut bacteria wasn't even introduced until the end. And so it really is going to be one of these last two, focusing on the rootworm's own genes. He studied the genes of the gut, and they have very different gut bacteria from normal ones. So this is kind of describing what we don't really have the evidence yet. But then if we look around, let's see. So here the team, unique to the resistance, they differ the relative number. Again, so let's look around here. The different microbes give the resistant beetles an edge when eating soybeans. The rootworms digest the protein in their meals using enzymes called cysteine proteases, and soybeans defend themselves with substances that can block. This is really explaining how they do it. And so the evidence for number 46, right, is D, right? And this is explaining the gut bacteria, and this is what we just read, help the rootworm survive in soybean. That's exactly what we read, right? They anticipate this alternate year. And so the answer D for the evidence, and then A, and these perfectly fit. And the last question, number 47, the main idea of the last paragraph. This is another function question. They're giving us direction. We're just looking at the last paragraph and seeing what is the function. This paragraph right here. The team proved that the bacteria were responsible by killing the bacteria with antibiotics. Sure enough, this drastically lowered the cysteine protease activity in the guts of rotation-resistant beetles and wrecked their ability to thrive among soybeans. So this is really just confirming, right? It's that bacteria, they killed the bacteria, and then it wrecked their ability to thrive, right? They couldn't overcome the rotation resistance anymore. And so the answer for this one, let's take a look. The main idea is that the cysteine proteases are harmful to rootworms when present in large quantities in the body. And so this is not accurate, right? They're not harmful, right, when present in large bodies. This is just part of the mechanism. Eggs laid by rotation-resistant rootworm will hatch into a corn of soybeans. No, this is like mentioned earlier. Remember, we're just focusing on the last paragraph. I'll just scan back again. This last paragraph is really just stating that it confirmed it was the bacteria because they killed it, and sure enough, this lowered the cysteine protease activity, and it diminished or wrecked their ability to thrive. And so it's got to be one of the last two. Let's take a look. Bacteria unique to the rotation-resistant rumors allow them to digest. This looks good, right? That's just confirming. I know this is sort of indirect because they killed the bacteria with antibiotics, but it prevented them from being resistant anymore. And so this is a true statement. If you look at D, rotation-resistant rumors do not digest soybeans using the cysteine proteases. That's not accurate, right? This is just sort of an indirect way of saying the bacteria was responsible for making them resistant. When they killed the bacteria, they didn't have the ability anymore. And so the answer here is C.